with a billion stars all around. I got a peaceful, easy feeling. I know you won't let me down, 'cause I'm already standing on the ground.
He wrote the Eagles' classic, Peaceful, Easy Feeling, co-wrote Already Gone, wrote other hits with his buddy Glenn Frey, wrote songs for Johnny Rivers, Emmylou Harris, Glenn Campbell, and many more. He's SoCal songwriter Jack Tempchin, a fixture in the 70s country rock scene who's still composing, performing, and making albums. He shares his stories, his songs, and his thoughts on the past, present, and future of rock and roll, right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Memorial Care is transforming the way healthcare is delivered, keeping our communities and businesses healthy by guiding them on the path to wellness with easily accessible hospitals, physician offices, and outpatient centers. Memorial Care, leading the way.
Hi, I'm Rick Reef, and I'm here with Jack Tempchin. Well, Jack, we just saw you performing a few moments ago in studio, one of your classic songs, Peaceful, Easy Feeling, one of the great Eagles songs. And let's talk about that. We're going to talk about a lot, but let's just talk about Peaceful, Easy Feeling. 1972, that's when you wrote it. Who were you? What were you doing? And how did that song come about?
Well, I was living in San Diego, and I was working as the MC at what they called a hoot night or open mic nights at 3 different coffee houses. And each one I probably made about $7 or $8, but somehow my rent was low, and that kept me going. And my buddy created a poster about me telling how great I was, and it quoted a lot of people, but it was all lies. But somebody in El Centro saw it. They had a little coffee house called the Aquarius, and they hired me to go out there. I don't think they knew that he had made up all this stuff. And so I was playing out there, and I met the waitress. She was gonna take me home, and then she changed her mind. So I ended up spending the night in this little club, and I just started writing the song Peaceful, Easy Feeling on the back of this poster.
And that had all the lies about you.
It had all the lies.
All right, okay.
And I wrote some stuff that wasn't so good, and then I stumbled upon the phrase Peaceful, Easy Feeling.
But boy, I mean, getting jilted like that, that's a downer, and yet how did you get a peaceful, easy feeling out of that?
Well, I'd been thinking and talking with my friends a lot, and we were into the Zen and all this stuff, and it's like you have to, you know, if you let something go, that makes your hand open to get something else. And the other thing was we talked about, well, when you give up trying, like if you give up trying to find somebody to be with, that's the moment when you're going to find somebody.
Okay, so if somebody says, Jack Tempchin, 1972, young kid, songwriter, that's pretty, I mean, you had the long hair and everything, I'm assuming, sure. So you were a hippie.
Absolutely hippie.
You were a hippie, and there was a lot of that in Southern California, and a lot of music being made. How do you then hook up, and how long did it take from the time you wrote that song to suddenly the Eagles have it?
It was a year or two, and my joke about it is the way to make it is to become friends with some very famous people in the music before, about 10 years before they get famous. That's all you have to do.
Nothing to it.
Just find the people.
And you were friends with?
I was friends with Glenn Frey and J.D. Souther, And then about 5 or 6 years after I met those guys, Glenn formed the Eagles, you know. And so that's how he already knew me, and he heard the song, and
he said, "I want the."
He wanted to do it.
He wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And those, you look back, are those? When you look back, what do you remember most about those times?
They were insanely glorious, interesting times. We had this youth movement of the hippies. You got your love beads. Everybody appeared in the park in rainbow clothing, and you know it was better than people think, and it hasn't happened again.
Yeah.
And there was a huge outpouring of creativity. All this stuff is the spirit of the times. You know, we had LSD, we had the birth control pill, and all this stuff were things that no other generation ever had. And so it all just came together in a huge creative outpouring, and I was happy to just be part of it. And music, every day, you'd bring home a record, and it would be Jimi Hendrix's first record, Are You Experienced? Then the next week you'd get another record, and it was Cream. So the music was exploding, and it was a fantastic.
Right. And of course, you really, in the 70s is when you really hit your stride.
Yeah.
You knew Glenn Frey. You met a lot of other famous people, and how many, were a lot of them not famous when you first met them?
Oh, yeah.
Or were they all, you know, who are some of the big names that you got to know?
Famous, but well, Jackson Browne I knew
and you wrote
before his first record came out. I met Tom Waits was the doorman at the coffee house that I played at. He collected the tickets at the door, and then eventually they put a piano in the place, and he started playing it and wrote all these great songs. So, and then Glenn Frey formed the Eagles, and J.D. Souther became famous as a writer and producer, and just a lot of other people that were hanging out at the Troubadour Club. And
you talked about the explosion of creativity, and there was the explosion of drugs and everything else.
That's right.
And of course, it claimed a lot of those artists. What do you think? You obviously survived, and you got through it. Any reason in particular? Well,
I coasted through that because LSD was okay, pot was okay, but I didn't take pills, and I didn't shoot anything, and I didn't get into cocaine or drinking, mainly because I just didn't like those things, and so that saved me.
Wow.
And then there's the drugs, but fame is another thing that kills people. It's very difficult, and I didn't go that way either. Being a songwriter, I didn't have to deal with a lot of that stuff.
So I guess that's the blessing part of it.
Yeah.
The other part of being a songwriter, how does it feel? And we're in a moment we're going to hear several of your well-known songs. But how does it feel to be a guy whose songs everybody has heard, everybody knows, and yet you're anonymous for the most part?
It's perfect. I mean, it's totally
So you
great.
don't have a big ego.
Well, no, I mean, I don't need one because I have all these songs out there. And if people don't know me, that's great too, because I can live my life. I went on tour in 1995 opening for Ringo Starr and his all-star band. And I remember walking through the airport from the plane to the front, and Ringo was like, people were just turning their heads and just flowing toward him, and I had to be in front of him because he didn't have enough bodyguards. Just walking from the plane out to the front of the airport, Ringo Starr can't go anywhere, you know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
So it's kind of nice not being famous on a level.
Now, when you open for Ringo Starr, do you get to know him? Do you chat with him? Or is it more like, you do your thing, he does his?
It just depends. I did have a few good conversations with him and found he was an extraordinarily incredible guy, really. But then there were all these other people in the band as well, because he had famous people in the whole band and everything.
Well, let's pause for a moment. Let's listen to some cuts, and we're going to talk about this album right here, Peaceful, Easy Feelings. This is your new album. You've done how many albums now?
I guess about 14 maybe.
Wow, okay. And so this one is special because it's really a compilation of all of your greatest hits.
Yes, I was fortunate about 3 years ago to get signed by Blue Elan Records. And they're very unusual. They care just about the music. They sign only people whose music they love, and they back them 100%. And they wanted me to do my hits, but first they let me do several albums of brand new songs. And then finally it came time to do the hits, and I had to decide, well, how am I going to do these songs that people have already heard? Some of them I did just like the records they know, and other ones I did completely differently. But that's kind of the story of this record.
Fantastic. Well, let's pause for a moment and listen to some of the hits of Jack Tempchin.
All right.
And I want to sleep with you in the desert tonight, with a billion stars all around. 'Cause I got a peaceful, easy feeling, but I got some news for you, and you'll soon find out it's true. And you'll have to eat your lunch all by yourself, 'cause I'm already gone, and I'm feeling strong. There's a devil to pay for what you put them through. And you got the feeling somebody's following you. Somebody, 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 somebody. You got a feeling somebody's following you.
It's late at night and we're all alone, with just the music of the radio.
No one's coming, no one gonna telephone. Just me and her and the lights down low.
And we're slow dancing, swaying to the music.
I found somebody, I found somebody to love. Oh yeah, I found somebody, I found somebody to love. You belong to the city, you belong to the night, living in a river of darkness beneath the neon light.
Wow. Well, I think everybody recognizes those tunes. Swaying to the music, I think. Well, let me ask you this way. Do you have a favorite song and a song that you think is the best song you've done?
Well, I like slow dancing, swaying to the music. I feel it did what I wanted it to do. I had fallen in love, and I wrote this love song that I felt it seemed to nail exactly what I was feeling. So that's probably my favorite. And of course, Peaceful, Easy Feeling, because everybody likes it so much. Right. And
Now, how old were you when you wrote Swaying to the Music?
I probably was about 25, maybe. Wow. Yeah.
And because there's a lot of, for a young person to be able to express themselves like that, I guess, is that one of the marks of an artist?
I guess a lot of artists, you hear their work when they were young, and it's just as good as anything they did afterwards. I'm not quite sure the mechanism how that works. Yeah. But
so let's talk. Your music is sometimes categorized, I guess, as country rock, but also the SoCal sound, the Southern California sound. You were talking a little bit more, or a little earlier, or late '60s, early '70s. There's this sound in California. Much of it, the hippie movement and stuff, is centered in Berkeley, right, in Northern California. But in Southern California, you had first in the '60s, you had the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, kind of the surf sound. What happened then in the 70s? What was going on with you and your groups?
Well, the 70s, I wrote Slow Dancing in 1972, which is the best year of the 60s, was 1972, if you were there. The 60s kind of extended over. So we had every type of music happening. Like Chris Hillman's from San Diego, and he was a bluegrass guy. David Crosby called him and said, I'm putting together a rock band. I want you to be in it. Do you play bass? And he goes, no. He says, well, you do now. And so they took bluegrass and put it in there, and then country. Chris Hillman and his bands were heavily influenced by the country music came in, and then the Stones and the English and the rock and roll. And it was just all coming together. And plus folk. I was really into folk music at the time. So it was just an amazing time.
So when your songs play, does a cash register go off? Does it say bingo? So how does that work? I guess, how does a songwriter make his money?
Yeah, well, when a song plays, you get 5 cents or 2 cents or whatever.
So if I'm listening on, let's say, Sirius Radio, and they play Swing to the Music?
It all used to be like that. When I was doing it, it would play on the radio, or somebody would sell a record, and you'd get a couple of cents off that record. Now, it's all different because people don't buy records that much.
Right. We haven't, and I should say, even though we're showing an album here,
yeah.
You've got a CD and
CD.
All right.
And so people just listen to it streaming or whatever. So nowadays, I don't know how songwriters can make a living. You know, I made a living already.
Do you still get checks in the mail?
I still do, but songwriters, because there's no record sales, you know, an artist can go out and play, but a songwriter, he just gets money from the songs, he or she, so it's a difficult time. I think things are going to change, and eventually writers will get paid, but meantime, a lot of people are going to have to get jobs at Walmart, and they're not going to be songwriters.
Yeah, how do you feel about streaming music? Is that good or bad for the business?
You know, it's the technology, the digital technology has swept through like a tidal wave and changed every business. Every business. There's no videotape stores to go to anymore, and music's just part of it. And hopefully it'll work out eventually where the creators will get paid again.
Well, let's talk about a little bit of conflict in one of the songs that's on this new album of yours. It's a greatest hits album, but it also includes a song that you co-wrote with your good late friend Glenn Frey, right? Mm-hmm. So let's take a listen to that. It's
Excellent.
Called Privacy.
Yes.
Every buck I made, we store it on a chip. It don't cost them zip. I want my privacy. I want to lay on the couch, just Tina and me. I want my privacy. Well, they can see my face from up in outer space. Man, the eye in the sky knows when I'm getting high. I want my privacy.
That is a song for our times.
Privacy is freedom, and it's so important, and we've pretty much lost it, you know, for now. I mean,
when did you write that?
I wrote it. We wrote that. Glenn and I wrote that about 10 or 12 years ago.
Wow.
So we already saw that. We were already very concerned about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, people were concerned, but I think those lyrics sound like you were almost anticipating where this was going.
Yeah. At one point, 10 years ago, I typed in my name in Google or whatever, and it just came up with my address and phone number, and I just realized that, hey, privacy's over. There's nothing you can do.
Even for a songwriter.
It's gone. And now, like in the song, it's everywhere. Your TV is watching you, and you know, they know more about you than you do about yourself now.
Tell us a little bit about your friend Glenn Frey, who passed away early last year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, what What do you remember best about him?
Oh, a lot of stuff. I mean, when I met Glenn, we were both hippies, and I asked him to stay at my house in San Diego whenever he came down to play. He and J.D. Souther, and they did. He did a couple of my songs with the Eagles. Then when the Eagles broke up, we started writing together. We had never written a song together. I'd known him 10 years at that point. We were just basically friends until 1980 when we started writing together. And then we wrote 4 or 5 of his albums. From 80 to 94, we wrote all his albums together. And Glenn was just, he was a stand-up guy, and he was the funniest guy that I've ever met. And he had a tremendous range of talents, not only musical, but people skills. He was kind of like the team captain. He could pick the players, he could motivate them, he could make a bunch of people into a unit. And also, what he wanted out of the music, he wanted the best band in the world. He wanted the best singers, best writers, best players. Not everybody has that goal. So he went after the right things, and he was able to pull off a lot of stuff that other people wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, you talk about Peaceful, Easy Feeling and how you wrote it, and then he interjected some things that you hadn't thought about.
Yeah, because I was just a folky guitar player, so I played it, but he put the drums and the bass and the harmonies, and then they were such that you could feel the desert wind from his arrangement and from the harmonies and from the feeling. They called him the lone arranger, because he had the ability to just dress up a song and make it work.
Who influenced you? Were there artists, musicians who influenced your sound?
Well, at first I was very, very into the blues. I started as a blues harmonica player. Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, and Sonny Boy Williamson, and all these blues people. Later on, Hoyt Axton. I loved Hoyt Axton, and then I started hearing Jackson Browne songs before I met him, before his first album came out. I used to do a couple of his songs, and I would just hear songs in the coffee houses, and those get influenced by all that different stuff.
So interesting. At your age, growing up there, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, did they have?
That was all happening, absolutely. And like everybody else, I was more influenced by Dylan than anybody else.
Yeah. Now, did you ever get to meet Bob Dylan?
I did briefly.
Okay. And enough said about that? Well, I mean,
that was good. Actually, he came backstage to see me, and he goes, "You write funny songs." And funny songs? And he goes, I like them. So
that's a high compliment.
Bob Dylan told me he liked my songs, and then later I went, did that really happen?
Well, I think anybody, or you entertained us here earlier, the crew and everything, and when you do that woohoo on Already Gone, man, I mean, I can tell you still love what you do. You're going to be performing at Coto de Casa on September 23rd, so folks can go to your website. We're showing it now, and they can they can get all the information about everything Jack Tempchin. Jack, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Rick. It's been terrific.
To get to talk to somebody who's part of the history of rock and roll.
Oh, great.
And that's it for now. Thanks again to my guest songwriter, Jack Tempchin. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreef.com. You can also catch our shows in our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. And now, a little more from Jack Tempchin.
Know you need a friend, someone you can talk to, who will understand what you're going through. When it comes to love, there's no easy answers, Only you can say what you're gonna do. I heard you on the phone. You took his number. Said you weren't alone, but you'd call him soon. Isn't that the guy who left you crying? Isn't he the one that made you blue? Then you remember those nights in his arms. You know you got to make up your mind. Are you gonna stay with the one who loves you? Are you going back to the one you love? Someone's gonna cry when they know they've lost you. Someone's gonna thank the stars above.
Inside OC is brought to you by
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.